these data centers harming our freshwater seas. We don't want these data centers near our friends and families. We don't want these data centers in anyone's communities. We don't want these data centers across the aisle. We're all saying please.
Welcome, everyone. We're going to start in just a minute. In the meantime, you can see a quick poll pop up.
From all sides, the tax breaks aren't worth it. You don't want this fierce persistence. From all sides, please don't sell us out, sis. Our water is not your coolant, and our state's not your radiator. We don't want these data centers harming our freshwater seas, hiking bills, hijacking land. A moratorium is what we need. We don't want these data centers, no secret deals or NDAs. We don't want these data centers. If you get bought, then we'll all pay.
Great. Welcome, everyone. Big shout out to the Michigan musicians Samantha Cooper and Charlie Millard for their song that we just heard, We Don't Want These Data Centers. Next slide, please. Before we get started, I'm just going to go through a few logistics. If you don't see the slides, you can click on the tab at the top of your screen that says Tech. They should show up there. You have access to the chat and the Q&A. For the chat, please make sure you are messaging everyone, not just hosts and panelists. You can change this in the To field. And you should see the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Please add your questions here for speakers as much as possible, not in the chat. It's much easier for us to track that way. We also invite everyone to introduce yourselves in the chat with your name, location, group or organization, if any, and a little bit of what your data center fight looks like. Last two things, please no AI note takers, and you should see a quick poll. Please do that to let us know who's in the room and help us tailor the content to you all today. Next slide. So welcome to Energy and Data Centers, Why Ratepayer Protections Are Not Enough. My name is Ali, and I'm the Director of Community Partnerships at the AI Now Institute and co-coordinator of the Data Center Working Group. This is the fourth session of our Data Center Policy in Practice training series based on our North Star Data Center Policy Toolkit. Next slide, please. AI Now is a policy research institute that pushes back against the trajectory of the AI industry away from commercial surveillance, concentration of power, and lack of public accountability. We are a member of the Data Center Working Group, which is co-hosting this series. The working group is a multi-state cross-issue formation fighting to stop the data center build-out and for a future where our tech and energy infrastructure serves the public good. Next slide, please. Each session of our training series dives deep into a specific policy area to help us identify the strongest possible policy recs to stop data centers, scaffolded steps to get there when that isn't possible, and real-life strategies from a panel of organizers on the ground. If you missed the last session on water and air, you can watch the recording at the link in the chat. And you can sign up for future sessions at the same registration link. Next slide. So today, our session will review the strongest possible policy interventions to protect our energy grid, everyday ratepayers, and our climate futures from the data center build-out, and also explore how to use these protections to stop or slow data center development. To kick us off, Jean Su at the Center for Biological Diversity will give us a foundation of what is happening in this moment with the build-out and our energy grid and the impacts for our climate, everyday affordability, and futures. Kate Brennan at AI Now will then review our local, state, and federal energy and ratepayer protection policy interventions, and we will spend most of the session with a brilliant organizer and advocate panel featuring Katie Miner, Marissa Paslick-Gillette, and Didi Belmarez. I'm so excited for this panel. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Jean to get us started. If folks have questions, please drop them again in the Q&A. And just really quickly, I'm so thrilled to introduce Jean. She is the Energy Justice Director and a senior attorney at the Center for Biological Diversity, and Jean wages strategic legal campaigns to advance a just and renewable energy future and hold our dirty utility monopolies accountable. So, Jean, help us understand this moment. How did we get here? Help us shine some daylight between what these tech companies say is possible and the reality.
Sounds great. Thank you, Allie, and thank you to this all-lady panel and this incredible group of advocates on this call. You guys are coming from all over the country, and it's completely inspiring. If we can move the slide, thank you. And next slide after that. Okay, so we covered a bit of this in the past workshop, but I did just want to re-ground us as to what we're fighting against. So, AI data centers, the way that I think about it is that they are an inherent threat to the public interest writ large, and they do it in multitude of different ways. The first that we're going to be focused a lot on today is the affordability issue. All of you are fighting data centers. You know that there are direct threats to ratepayers who are cross-subsidizing data centers, their dirty energy, their grid build out. Is that fair? Absolutely not. So we want to focus on affordability and how to fight against that. But in addition to ratepayer protections, there are deeper threats that we want to not disentangle and disaggregate because they need to be kept together. The AI boom is being fueled primarily by dirty gas right now. So there is an inherent threat to our clean air and water. Water is also a huge resource that's under threat because of data centers. Because of that huge gas build out, there are climate emergency impacts, carbon into the air, but then all the impacts that come from the climate emergency that we'll unpack in a second. And finally, there is an inherent threat to our democracy because of the accretion of power of big tech teaming up with big fossil fuels, teaming up with big utility and big government to really squeeze the ratepayers and the public on all ends. Next slide, please. So this is a graph that I wanted to get everybody's eyes on. What you're going to see here, it's a graph from the International Energy Agency. And from 2020 to 2035, we have this incredible influx of electricity needs in the United States in these 15 years. We're at the 2026 mark, so that's kind of halfway through this graph. But as you see, AI data centers are huge electricity guzzlers. And the slide's a little bit off here, but as you can see as well, methane gas, fracked gas, natural gas, whatever you want to call it, is going to be fueling the vast majority of these electricity needs. Next slide, please. What that means inherently is that AI data centers are the new lifeline for the fossil fuel and utilities industries. I come at this from both a ratepayer perspective, but a climate perspective. I'm a climate attorney. And what we see is that AI data centers are this new lifeline to dying industries that we're facing, an end, we'd like to think an end point because of the climate emergency. New regulations were coming down, clean energy was being brought on. There were tighter regulations, tighter laws being passed under the Biden administration to crush the fossil fuel industry over time and phase it out. Now, because of data centers, there is a huge new lifeline. We've thrown it to them and they are guzzling it up, the fossil fuel and utility industries. This is a graph of the IEA data, and what we see clearly from 2024 to the 2035 liftoff case is that, again, fossil gas is going to be powering the vast majority of our data center electricity needs. That's what's being projected right now by industry. Next slide, please. So what this means is that we are facing an inherent increase in not only our dirty air and access to clean water, but also the devastation that the climate emergency will bring. This first image is a very straightforward image. The burning of fossil fuels means that we will have more harmful air pollution that is causing cancer, that is causing so much disease, that is threatening the public health, especially in already overburdened environmental justice communities across the country. The AI data center issue is an environmental justice issue. But in addition to that, the greenhouse gas emissions from that build out is going to be leading to ever increasing impacts that the climate emergency is bearing down on the United States with. One of those biggest impacts, for example, is impacts from extreme heat. And this is a graph of the yearly heat related deaths that is ever climbing every year because of the record breaking heat from new greenhouse gas emissions that are coming into our atmosphere. Next slide, please. This graph, we don't have to go into it. This is from our report that we did earlier last year, but it basically shows that we were on a trajectory to basically get down our power emissions in order to meet the United States nationally determined contribution, which is basically our goal in the international climate space for what it means to actually keep temperatures below 1.5 degrees for planetary survival. And what you'll see here is that data centers are completely taking us off kilter, are completely driving up our power sector emissions so that we will not be reaching our goal if we do not tackle the power sector part of energy, of data centers right now. Next slide, please. Okay, so what does this mean? And what does this mean for the response that has come about for energy concerns? So there are ratepayer protections, and our panelists are going to be talking a lot about how we're at the very first point of stopping the bleeding, bringing these issues as economic issues to ratepayers. Ratepayers should not be subsidizing the largest industry, the wealthiest industry in the world, which is big tech right now, nor should they be subsidizing the fossil fuel industry, which is the second wealthiest industry. So there's tons of ratepayer protection issues that we can unpack. One of the policies that has been approached and put out there by big tech companies and data center companies is that data centers can pay their fair share. So that people are saying, hey, when we enter into utility commission proceedings, maybe data centers will just pay for their portion of the new gas power plant, their portion of the grid. There are two problems with that policy. The first is that paying their fair share, when we actually look at who is subsidizing whom across the entire ratepayer section, we're seeing that residential customers generally are paying far more per kilowatt hour than industrial and commercial players. So data centers having their own class or becoming commercial and industrial players has been analyzed, and it is not actually paying what they should be paying on rate with other ratepayers. The second, residential ratepayers. The second issue is that paying your fair share alone economically doesn't get at our deeper issue of the dirty power that is being put on the grid. So that is kind of one policy that we want to break down. The second policy that's been proposed is bring your own power. So many of you are fighting data centers right now. One potential possibility that data center developers have been putting out there is we're not going to touch the grid. We're not going to impact your rates. You don't have to pay for our grid. We're going to be bringing on our own power. One of the biggest downfalls of this, of course, is that we know that many of the data centers are building out their own gas generators, their diesel generators, and in fact, nuclear as well. There have been very few data centers that have proposed actual renewable energy projects when they bring it on themselves. In addition to that, labor unions are very concerned about the bring your own power piece because there are not jobs there. There are also not safety regulations that are needed to ensure that the power grid is running safely. And the final energy response that we have heard from data centers and utility commissions is let's make it clean. So if data centers are going to be brought into our grid system, let's power them with renewable energy. Oftentimes, this has just been voluntary commitments so far the data centers are putting out there. In actuality, that has not come to fruition. We have seen gas power plants be the primary source of new data center energy. And on top of that, we have this idea of clean that also needs to be addressed. There are many nuclear power plants, for example, and SMRs, so small nuclear reactors that are being proposed right now. That brings on further public interest threats that we all need to open our eyes on in terms of what types of energy are actually renewable and actually clean that deserve or that should be the types of energy that data centers are being fueled with. I want to bring up this other principle as well, that this is the wealthiest industry in the world. Do they have a way to actually help fund our clean energy transition? One of the ideas that my organization has been pioneering is that actually if data centers are to come online, and that's a big if, right? There's many steps to get there. But if it is that this data center is coming online, can we actually use their commitments to fund the types of microgrid systems, distributed energy resources like battery rooftop storage in communities first? Get that amount of energy like rolling in distributed energy, and then basically free up that capacity on the grid for data centers to use instead. So you do not need a new gas plant. You can supplement that type of energy with new renewables, but can we also use some of this revolution to potentially fund our clean energy transition? So these are all in the mix of ideas about how to ensure that if a data center is built, it is built with energy that actually is truly clean and renewable. Next slide, please. So there are many different areas of intervention, many of which you all are already working on, but I wanted to just give a little bit of light on these, and our panelists will take this to town. So different areas of intervention, one where we've seen a lot of incredible democratic movement on the ground is at the municipal and local government, often pertaining to zoning and land use approvals. A second area is county permitting bodies. So your air permits, your water permits, additional land use permits. Those are all areas to litigate on and to actually cause political stir where you have regulators in a position of power to potentially stop or delay the data centers. Then we go into public utility commission. So this is where the ratepayer protections are front and center, and this can be literally hashed out in rate cases, the creation of clean energy tariffs, as well as CPCNs, which are basically the certificates that are given for new energy generators like gas power plants to fuel data centers. Can we challenge those in front of the regulatory body there? And then finally, we have legislatures, which it looks like a ton of you all are working on legislative solutions like moratoria, as well as courts and bringing this to litigation. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so in my final 20 seconds, I do want to alert you all to another huge trend that goes beyond the site fights or even the state fights of individual data center projects. And this is an area that I am personally litigating in right now. We are seeing the increasing corporate consolidation of data centers with private equity and utilities and fossil fuel companies. There's actually a merger trend happening. So for those of you in Minnesota, New Mexico, or Ohio, or Indiana, you know that you are ground zero for private equity like Blackstone and BlackRock coming in to buy up your utility. And the reason for that is that those private equity firms currently own huge data center developers who need access to cheap electricity. And so in order to get access to that cheap, dirty electricity, they're buying up the utilities directly to vertically integrate. I'm working on the New Mexico case with some incredible New Mexico advocates. And what's happening right now is that Blackstone is trying to buy up PNM, the public with utility to fund its data centers or to fuel its data centers with gas. But in addition to that, Blackstone has just bought up the #1 grid manufacturing companies for grid components that supply the utility. And they also have incredible Permian Basin assets, which means you have one private equity firm controlling all the way down a vertically integrated scheme that at the end of the day will screw over ratepayers and screw over our air, water, and climate. So there are active ways to fight against this. Marissa will also be talking about this new Next Era and Dominion deal that's been put on the table, but I wanted to also bring that to our attention because that is part of fighting against the AI data center build out right now. And with that, I will shush it up and move on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jean. That was incredible. Deeply appreciate the myth busting, especially. We are going to now talk about how to do this in practice. And just reflecting on the poll that many of you filled out, I want to highlight there's many different strategies in this room. About a third of folks here are fighting electricity bill increases. Another third are fighting to limit the amount and type of energy that data centers can use. Another 28% are fighting fossil fuel expansion, and 12 or 13% of you are fighting for public power campaigns, and we're going to dive into all of these areas. 60% of folks here said that they weren't sure or didn't know how to use energy policy as tools to stop data centers. So Kate is now going to go through the specific policy recs to help us figure that out. But before we get into that, next slide, please. Where do these recommendations come from? These are from the North Star Data Center Policy Toolkit, which is geared towards stopping, slowing, and restricting rampant data center development in the US at the local, state, and federal level. We include North Star interventions, the strongest possible options, as well as scaffolded steps to get there for when that is not feasible. Next slide, please. The toolkit is a menu of options mapping all the possible policy tools from bans and zoning to energy, as we're going to talk about today, to taxation, corporate power, since not everything is possible in every jurisdiction. But what all of these recommendations share is the belief that we, the public, should decide whether or not a data center works in the interests of our communities. Next slide. The recommendations, thank you. The recommendations that you'll hear today were developed in consultation with over 100 organizers, advocates, technical experts across the country. We're dropping more information about them into the chat, and a huge shout out to all of our panelists who were truly essential for the energy and ratepayer protection sections. Okay, Kate, I will pass it over to you. Next slide. Kick it off.
Thanks so much, Allie. So today I'll be speaking through the strongest possible policy interventions to protect our energy grid, everyday ratepayers, and our climate futures. I'll start with local interventions, then I'll move to state and federal. But because of how energy markets are structured and regulated, there is significant overlap across these areas. So this invites the opportunity for us to think non-traditionally and expansively about our borders and how we can best push back to protect our natural resources. Next slide. Great. So first, local communities can leverage the approval or zoning process to stop a data center or regulate its energy use. Local communities can do this by building in binding energy requirements into the approval and zoning process. So first, local governments can require data center developers to receive a commitment letter from the energy utility company saying that the utility company has enough capacity to serve that customer. Communities can then go a few steps further. They can require that data centers make their electricity use public in monthly reporting and hold data centers liable for variances in energy thresholds they estimated in their application. So they are not using more electricity than expected without consequence. And if at any time use is exceeding locally determined thresholds or the utility's stated capacity, a local government can revoke the conditional use permit. Next slide. Local communities can also regulate data center energy use. So first, they can mandate in the application process that data centers use 24/7, zero emissions, additional renewable energy to power the data center. Additional is a super important requirement to ensure that data centers do not take energy away from another project that would have used the available renewable energy to decarbonize. Communities can also prohibit off-grid and behind-the-meter power generation. This is also known as bring your own power solutions. These proposals often mean expanded gas generation or nuclear power, and they allow data centers to sidestep investments in the shared energy infrastructure that benefit them. If communities do allow data centers to bring their own power, they must heavily scrutinize these commitments and require that the power is additional and renewable. These commitments often fail to sufficiently materialize in time or at all. And so local communities also make sure that the data centers appropriately pay for any electricity grid services that it's actually receiving. Local communities can also prohibit data centers from using backup diesel generators, which degrade our air quality and worsen our community health. If backup generators are deemed necessary, communities can pass ordinances regulating their use, including 1, requiring a permit, 2, requiring proper notification to all community members, 3, mandating pollution control equipment be installed, and 4, conducting cumulative impact reporting before approvals. Finally, we know that some state and local governments exempt data centers from paying sales tax on their electricity use. If a local government is not preempted from doing so, they can tax data centers' electricity use and increase the rate during energy emergencies like heat waves. Then a portion of this tax can be funneled into local community projects or energy infrastructure. Next slide, please. So this next set of recommendations I'm going to speak about are targeted to the state level, and I'll start with ratepayer protections. Regulators must ensure that the costs of building energy infrastructure to serve data centers are not unfairly passed on to ordinary customers, including households and small businesses. This means ensuring that 100% of costs associated with the development of data centers, including construction and power generation, are paid by the data centers, not taxpayers, at a rate that is proportional and just. So we can do this through tariff schedules, meaning the pricing structure set by utility companies and regulators. Large load electricity customers, like data centers, must be subject to a tariff schedule that's equal or proportional to the costs of serving them. So this might require instituting a new schedule or amending an existing one and assigning all proper fees. Oregon recently passed a law instituting a revised tariff schedule for large industrial users like data centers. Transparency is a super important piece of the puzzle for protecting ratepayers, because if deals are negotiated in secret, then the public does not have an opportunity to intervene. So states can require that electricity use is subject to public disclosure laws and prohibit the use of secrecy contracts like non-disclosure agreements in all data center development deals. Next slide. So Public utility commissions can also protect against the risk that data center developers pull out of their deals early or use less demands than expected, which would leave communities to shoulder the costs of the build-out. So this can be achieved through contract terms like minimum contract lengths, upfront payments, and even security deposits. Public utility commissions can also set early termination fees and penalties if a data center decides to shut down early. For example, a settlement with AEP Ohio utility company requires a data center to pay minimum charges for 3 years after notice of termination. Next slide. Now, the staggering power demand projections driven by data center development threaten to destabilize our already fragile energy grids and prolong our dependence on the fossil fuel industry. So first, states and regulators can pass laws and regulations designed to protect our grid stability. These include minimum monthly payments no matter what the actual usage is, the right to curb electricity use in emergencies, or placing caps on total electricity use for data centers. In Maine, for example, in-state electricity sales to data centers are capped at 25% of all sales. And additionally, states can implement policies that promote additional renewable infrastructure and energy use while opposing the development of fossil fuel-based generation. Now, importantly, when it comes to renewable energy infrastructure, the goal is not to advance this technology for data centers at the expense of other needs. Next slide. So at the federal level, I want to talk about FERC, which stands for the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which is the federal agency responsible for regulating the interstate transmission of energy. FERC's role in regulating data centers is a very live issue. In fact, we're expecting a proposal to be published in June of 2026 that will outline FERC's federal authority on data centers. So I'll call out just a few of the strongest policy demands FERC could implement. Similar to our recommendation at a state level, FERC can ensure that data centers pay for 100% of the infrastructure costs and upgrades needed to service them. FERC can reject policies that enable AI data centers to soak up all of the available energy, and they can compel the collection and publication of data centers' energy use across the entire country. So many of us on this call are likely tracking the FERC proposal, so there'll be a lot more to discuss soon. So next and last slide. So I want to end by reviewing some of the ways we can reassert democratic control over the energy sector, which has faced decades of consolidation, vertical integration, and private takeover. So these interventions span the local, state, and federal level. So I think a third of us are working on this, which is amazing to see. So throughout the US, New York and Tucson, Milwaukee, bold public power campaigns are demanding shifts from investor-owned utilities to democratically controlled power systems. This is a strong way to protect against rapidly rising electricity prices because investor-owned utility rates have increased 49% more than inflation, whereas the rates from publicly owned utilities have remained 44% less than inflation. We also can deploy an anti-monopoly toolkit to tackle concentrated power across the energy stack. This is a very live issue with NextEra set to acquire Dominion Energy, a merger that would create the US's largest utility company. And finally, the federal government can mobilize its authority to prevent the private equity takeover of investor-owned utility companies like we're seeing with BlackRock in New Mexico and Minnesota. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kate, for walking us through all of that. We're now going to move into our panel discussion to talk about how folks are organizing on the ground against data center impacts on our energy grid, climate, and ratepayers. So I want to welcome our three incredible organizers and advocates joining the conversation. I'm going to read a very brief version of their bios. The full versions are in chat. KD Miner is the Community Solutions Manager for the Alliance for Affordable Energy, where she advocates for true climate solutions that are led by the people most impacted. From coordinating city communications to speaking on the effects of AI on the nation's energy transition, KD works to bridge the gap between old wisdom and new tools and is also an incredible mutual aid organizer. Didi Belmarez is the clean energy advocate in the Texas Office of Public Citizen and the co-founder of the Texas Data Center Rebellion. Her focus is on the clean energy transition, fair utility rates, and protections for ratepayers. And Marissa Paslik-Gillette is a senior fellow at the American Economic Liberties Project and previously served from 2019 to 2025 as the chairman of Connecticut's Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, focusing on transitioning the state to performance-based regulation and other mechanisms designed to enhance utility accountability and transparency. So Katie and then Didi set the stage for us. What does data center energy use mean for our families and communities in Louisiana, Texas, and beyond?
Amazing. Thank you for having me. What does that mean for Louisiana? Well, the tone from our leadership is that Louisiana is open for business, and they are offering literally every possible resource to the lowest bidder at this point. It is literally a race to the bottom here in Louisiana. Our own Public Service Commission recently made a remark that's just kind of been sitting with me, and they say only in regulation is 8 months considered a long time to make a decision, comparing themselves even to our own state legislature who passes bills in 90 days. Well, if you've seen what Louisiana has come up with in 90 days in the past few years, then you understand why we are concerned, right? We have been arresting doctors. We have redistricted our state, right? We have led the charge in changing the ways that people are able to advocate for themselves. So you understand firsthand why we are so concerned. Now, data centers in particular, that type of energy use affects every single ratepayer in Louisiana, from the small two bedroom home to our largest industrial users in the state. Um, all of that can be recovered, right? Anything our Public Service Commission deems prudent or justifiable, our utilities can recover all of those costs. Now, what does that mean here in Louisiana in particular? We are corporate captives right now. Our largest utility has been going about this in the worst possible ways, completely pivoting from even commitments that they've made a few short years ago about cleaning our grid, which is historically unstable. And if you would like a particular example, Meta's Hyperion data center. I've been talking about this one particular data center for the past year now. If you're not aware, our Public Service Commission approved 3 gas plants for a hyperscaler owned by Meta in North Louisiana. They rushed that approval in less than 10 months. And as it stands, if and when Meta should leave after that 4-year lease agreement, 4-year lease agreement, that means that the back at least 26 years of that power plant then falls onto all the ratepayers. Now, it may not sound like, okay, well, that's 20 years from now. Why should I care? I might not even be here. We have a trade association here in Louisiana called the Louisiana Energy Users Group. They are a trade association that represents all of those chemical refineries that we are so well known for. They even went on record in saying that once this shifts, right, the likelihood of the cost shifting happening on the back end of this deal is a bad business deal. Even the industrials don't want to play this game. And so when you've got environmentalists and consumer protectors on the same side as your large energy users, we've really got to reconsider this conversation.
Thank you so much. Dee Dee, same question to you.
Hello, everybody. What data centers mean to ratepayers in Texas is, first of all, Texas is not to be outdone by Louisiana. Our governor is doing everything possible to bring data centers to Texas. We are second to Virginia in the number of data centers in the state. By 2030, it's anticipated that Texas will be number one, and it's definitely going to impact people here. For example, last legislative session, our legislators passed a bill, Senate Bill 6. It was a bill to enhance grid stability, and yet at the same time, making it easier for large load customers like data centers to be able to connect to our grid. By 2035, it's anticipated that over 70% of the demand coming into our grid will come from data centers.
Corporate captives, that's what you said, Katie. Definitely seems to apply here. Marissa, can you help us understand why these utilities are going all in on data centers and AI, and where does corporate power and influence come into play?
Absolutely. And I cannot empathize enough with people about the affordability crisis in the moment that we're in right now. And I think if there's anything good that will come from this, and in my experience, in order to make real change in the utility and energy industry, you need to have a moment of crisis where you can draw everyone's attention to the matter and really have the conversations that this webinar is engaging in so that we can educate our elected officials and decision makers about the consequences of some of these decisions. There's a stat out there that talks about how there are 200 commissioners across the country making decisions annually about $200 billion in utility spending. And that was my role for the past number of years, was I was one of those 200 people. And I think what folks probably are learning as they engage in these processes with the data center conversation, that the public utility commissions, and every state has one, whether they're elected or appointed, they are just as under-resourced and under-invested in by our state governments, as you probably feel at times in the organizing community. And I think utilities and data centers and the AI boom are taking advantage of this. And you see this with the NextEra Dominion merger deal that was announced just in the past few weeks. It's 100% stock for stock transaction that's valued at, I think, $67 billion. And make no mistake that the larger these utilities get, the harder they are to regulate, both from a structural perspective, practical perspective, legal perspective. And I think we'll get into a little bit further into the panel what some of the perverse incentives are at stake with the way utilities earn their money. And I think that can very easily trace to why the utilities are so engaged in the data center boom, because it contributes to how they make money for their investors. It's been decades since our utilities have seen the type of load growth that we're seeing now. And the capital expenditures that they have to make in order to build out the system is how they earn their money. The return on equity or utility profits are only earned on capital expenditures, the poles and wires, the build out that has to happen to serve these data centers. And operational expenditures like technological solutions, efficiencies in the grid, those do not earn a return. So again, we'll talk about this in just a few minutes more about the perverse incentives, but that is at its heart why utilities are so invested in assisting with this is they spend money to make money, and there's a lot to be spent and a lot to be made in this moment.
Thank you so much for breaking that down. Dee Dee, I'm going to turn back to you to help us talk and understand more about clean energy. How are you fighting in Texas for clean energy without accelerating the data center build out critically? And how does that intersect with ratepayer protections? We would love to learn what strategies you're testing in a difficult political environment.
Yes. First, we're reiterating that clean energy like wind and solar and battery storage are dispatchable, which is a wonky utility word that means these resources can be turned on quickly to meet power demand. When you put solar and battery storage together, they are reliable, competitive, and often times more affordable. We can look at the ERCOT market, our grid operator here in Texas, and oftentimes you'll see that solar is outperforming fossil fuels and meeting power demand. For example, yesterday we had a big storm come in, and right now it's pretty gloomy, overcast, but still, right now natural gas is primarily driving the market, but right behind it is solar power, right? Just right behind it. So we always have to remind our elected officials, especially at the utility level, that they need to ensure that our utilities are planning to meet future demand with various clean energy resources. And when they're modeling energy use, make sure that not only it's clean energy, it's also energy and efficiency and weatherization programs, because these programs help people, right? And then we're also working to eliminate fossil fuels from our power supply so ratepayers don't face the volatility of gas pricing, and also to help ratepayers not have to fall into this data centers are paying for a fair share. And it's hard for families right now in Texas. Texas shut off power to more residents than any other state in 2024. Nationwide in 2024, 13.4 million people lost their power because they were struggling to pay their bill. 3 million of those shutoffs came from Texas. In San Antonio, we're the third largest poor city in the nation. There are 180,000 customers who cannot pay their gas or electric bill. That's more than 10% of our utilities customer. Our utility is CPS Energy, the largest municipally owned vertically integrated utility in the nation. Our water utility, San Antonio water system, will not share how many customers are struggling to pay their bills. And this is wrong because we let data centers use as much power and water as they want, and yet so many people struggle to pay their bills and are not, I can't imagine not being able to have electricity or water for my family.
No one should. I'm reminded of organizers who talk about it in the frame of no power means the insulin in the fridge goes bad, right? No power for the oxygen machines for our elders, right? Like this has real material impacts, and I'm grateful for you for walking through them. Marissa, I want to go back to the incentives that you mentioned before. What would counter these incentives and actually push utilities to pass protections needed to stabilize our grid and ensure that it works in service of everyday people? There's been some questions in the Q&A about this as well.
Yes, great question. And the even better news here is some of the tools or ways to address these perverse incentives that I'm about to walk through have wide-ranging benefits to the affordability conversation more generally. So we can help ourselves here and in the larger utility affordability context. So that perverse incentive, the one that's really at the heart of the issue in the energy industry for these investor-owned utilities. So the investor-owned utilities that have shareholders that they're answering to first and foremost, despite providing a public good. That perverse incentive of the CapEx bias that I walked through just a minute ago, it's driven by these excessive returns on equity that are being authorized by state public utility commissions. So starting at that point by addressing the ROE question, the utility profits, CEO pay, setting into motion metrics for affordability that must be achieved prior to recovering in rates, utility compensation. There are a whole host of those solutions that we can pursue here, that the more you make it less attractive for a utility to default invest into a capital expenditure like poles and wires, the more likely it is that we'll deploy operational efficiencies like getting more out of our grid. And it will make it less attractive for these utilities to play in the sandbox with the data centers who are requesting these build outs. If the utility is not earning excessive amounts of profit by meeting the build out that the data centers are requiring, they're going to be more likely to scrutinize the requests that these speculative load requests that are being filed in multiple states, even when a data center only intends to locate in one. So again, just to recap that, you want to look for buzzwords that address the CapEx bias. So those are ROE reforms. Those are shared savings mechanisms that help to push the equalization of capital expenditures and operational expenditures. It's addressing load forecasting issues, making the utility more responsible and accountable for how they are building out their system to meet this speculative load. Again, this is definitely one of those situations where you need to follow the money, and that will make it less attractive for the utility to partner with the data center, and they are going to focus more on their natural monopoly responsibilities of providing safe and reliable service.
Thank you so much. Katie, you talked a little bit before about the opposite of what we want to see, right? Fast tracking of data center connections to the grid. How are you all pushing back against this in Louisiana?
Absolutely. And Dee Dee, I just want to take a moment to thank you for grounding us in what folks in Texas are experiencing right now. Here in Louisiana, what does it mean when a commission can approve 10 gas plants for one single customer and at the same time approve the first ever electrical service line abandonment in our country's history, right? There are people in South Louisiana right now with access to no power. They do not have any power right now. And that same commission, in the same day, let this company come in and build 10 gas plants. We're talking 26 million tons of carbon emissions that we're expecting. This one single site will be the largest point source emitter in the country when they're online. And that's for one customer. So how are we pushing back? How are we pushing back? We're doing our job, and that's regulatory interventions, y'all. We are delaying this every possible chance we get by filing those interventions. And what does that look like? Well, as many of you know, the transparency behind these deals is unprecedented. It is unmatched. They are creating new definitions and new ways to go about not seeing what they're actually doing. And so we are pushing in that way, right? Make this actually transparent. Many of you may not actually know this, but a lot of times the parent company in these deals, they're not even listed on the electrical service agreement. What does that mean? The company is not on the light bill. My house has to have my name on my light bill, but we are not holding trillionaires almost to the exact same standard, right? And so we are asking, we are pleading, and we're filing interventions all the way up through the commission's judicial level that say, hey, make these people at the least come to the table so that we can know what they're asking, we can know what they need, and we can advocate for the best possible solution for the people who are not just going to be here for 4 years, but for the next 40 years and the next 400 years.
Absolutely. Thank you, Katie. We have one more round of questions for the three of you, and please keep the questions coming in the Q&A. Marissa, your work with the Connecticut Public Utilities Regulatory Authority focused on utility accountability. What does accountability to ratepayers? And when I think of ratepayers, I think of everyday people, small businesses, my family, right? What does accountability to everyday people look like in terms of the data center build out?
Well, it looks like just about anything other than what we have today, because I think public utility commissions are pretty renowned for being black boxes and very difficult to understand, very opaque in their decision making. In Connecticut, we focused a lot on lowering the procedural barriers so that folks could understand how to participate in our processes. And if you're looking for guidelines on how to do it, there are definitely other commissions around the country who have convened procedural dockets. Massachusetts has one open right now. So you could start there, because when you hear Katie talking about the types of interventions that are needed, this can be a very challenging and resource intensive thing to do. So it starts with your commission prioritizing lower procedural barriers for intervention, which are going to help not just in this context, but moving forward. Because the bad news here is that even if you can get good legislation passed that has good barriers, prescriptions around how these tariffs or other things should be structured, it's going to go to your commission that has to implement it, and then it's going to come up in every subsequent rate case thereafter. So this is going to require not just short-term groundwork from all of us to make sure that that it's established correctly first, but we're going to have to continue to engage with these commissions and with these utilities, on an annual basis in some cases. So this is a good time to really focus on making sure there are adequate and transparent disclosures. The information asymmetry that persists in this industry is really unparalleled, and it's getting worse with the non-disclosure agreements that several speakers have talked about. And then lastly, I just want to really highlight there are about 40 states in the country where your commissioners are appointed by governors, or in some cases the legislature, and around 10 that have some form of an election. This is the time to pay attention to how the PUC commissioners, the public utility commissioners, are selected and put into their positions in your state. This is a classic example of elections have consequences, and you want the commissioners in those positions now to make the decisions right now about how data centers are coming online, but also to be in those positions in the years to come as those tariffs and other things keep coming up every year thereafter, because utilities have a way of outlasting us. They can out-resource us and they can outlast us, and we need to start addressing some of the structural inequities in the system and the people problem that we have. And by that, I mean the lack of resources and qualified, competent commissioners that are in these roles.
To get back to the point of specific utility intervention, Katie, I want to draw on your deep in the weeds expertise here from the other side of it, right? Or Marissa's been on the inside. How can people get involved in these processes where they live, and what can you be pushing for? What regulatory inventions are you filing for?
Absolutely. It is critically important for people in decision-making authorities to hear from the people they are impacting. They see me coming and they'll look the other way. They'll get on their phones, they'll have side conversations, but it's when the people who pay the bills and the people who know their cousins and the people who run the businesses that they say anchor our state, when these people show up and speak, they listen, right? And you may not get an immediate response, but that attention makes them very uncomfortable, because from that attention, then you get media attention, right? And scrutiny. And the last thing these people want, at least here in Louisiana, is to feel embarrassed, right? Do not embarrass them, right? And so as much embarrassment as we can generate, that's what we've been doing, right? We've been leaning on people power and the power of narrative and media to really shape how not only we're advocating as an organization, but how the state should be representing all of us, right? We should be putting our best foot forward in everything we do. And we are leading the pack and just absolutely doing a terrible job at that, right? Again, just inviting anybody and everybody who wants to build to come on and build. Since that one Meta announcement, we've had Amazon announce 3 campuses. We've had Anthropic come, and just yesterday they announced a new data center on the I-49 corridor, right? So how are we getting people involved? We are, one, sharing the wealth, right? We are demystifying a lot of that really opaque language, making it easy for people to understand and making it more accessible. Not a lot of great things came out of COVID, but we were at least able to get our public service commission on Zoom, right? Or get them on YouTube, right? They have a YouTube channel. Watch those meetings. And then when you hear a thing that affects you, send them a letter, an actual written letter, send them an email, call them. They need to hear be from people that aren't just interveners, people that are not paid to do this. They need to hear that the decisions they are making are affecting real people, real businesses, real families, and people that intend to stay and anchor in these areas for generations to come.
Absolutely. Dee Dee, I'm going to give you the final word here, and then we'll wrap up with some resources and a closing poll. Preemption is also a huge issue on policy making around data centers in general, especially in Texas. How are you all approaching that locally, and what tips do you have for others?
I think preemption will always be on the back of everybody's mind when considering potential ordinances or moratoria on data centers, for example. And that is what communities across the state are calling for, because they are worried about the power usage. They are extremely worried in Texas about water, because we are in a water scarce state. I don't remember how long it's been. It's been years that we've been in a drought. We've seen county commissioners, city council members in Hood County, Round Rock, that have rejected moratoria because they either think the counties or the city don't have the authority to enforce them, or that the moratorium could eventually be preempted, because that's what Texas does. When they don't like good things happening at the local or state level, they preempt them. But that didn't stop County Judge Becerra in Hays County to draft a moratorium based on drought levels in that county. And it didn't stop county leaders in Hill County, Texas from enacting a 1-year pause on data centers and their associated power plant construction, which is huge, right? They put a pause on a power plant from being built. Harlingen just became the first city to pass a 120-day moratorium 2 days ago. So these moratoria are not happening because of the good intentions of our government leaders. They're happening because community members are organizing. They're showing up. I support data center fights around South Central Texas, around San Antonio, and I go to these town halls, to these data center info sessions, and 350 people are showing up because they don't want them in their community. So when they show up to these meetings, when they show up to the county and city council meetings, their elected leaders are seeing this, right? They're seeing it happen all over the state. So what I'm going to say is just keep on organizing, keep petitioning, file those open records requests, keep showing up to the meetings, and challenge the notion that moratoria are not possible in your city or your state. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our incredible panel. I have learned so much from all of you in the last years organizing with you in this work and today, and I could speak for an hour about how grateful I am. We are gonna wrap up our panel. We've tried to answer as many in the questions in the Q&A as possible, and we are gonna share out resources as well. I'm just gonna close with a few resources that folks can use in their next steps. First, we have a poll up. Please do fill it out so we know what your remaining questions are. Second, if we can reshare the slides, I want to highlight that our session next Wednesday, same time, will focus on tax incentives, banning NDAs, myth-busting economic development and jobs claims, and get into some questions around corporate secrecy and transparency that were raised in the Q&A. Next slide. We also have a long list of policy and organizing resources, which we're sharing in the chat and we'll share out after. I want to highlight that on Tuesdays, now through mid-June, the Data Center Working Group, led by our partners at the Kairos Fellowship, are hosting a 5-part data center organizing training series that complements this policy training really well. So if that's useful to you, please do share with your communities. Next slide. And then I also just want to highlight resources and a new report from the Alliance for Affordable Energy, which we'll drop in the chat. So resources from the speakers that you heard today. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, huge gratitude to you all, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.